Okay.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Mosaic podcast. I am so excited for today's guest and for you to meet today's guest, because the whole process of this podcast is to help you see things in people that you don't normally see, that when you look at them, to disrupt the first impressions that we have of people. And Beth, in the short time that I've gotten to know her, has completely disrupted the way I saw her initially. And I'm so excited to bring you into this conversation. Beth, welcome. I want to say hi to you, but I also want to let people know a little bit about who you are. And we're just going to read a short bio and then we'll get going. But I want to say hi and welcome before I do that.
I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I think it's going to be great.
It is my absolute honor. Of all the things Beth has done, she is like a queen maker, and those are her words. And she's been that for about 14 years through her books, retreats, workshops, and spiritual wellness brand. She's equipped women, and we're going to talk about men too, but she's equipped women with the tools they need to reclaim their crown and step into their role of queen of their own life. The central idea of her work, and I want you to hear this, the central idea of her work is that every single person is a divine being and already has what they yearn for within them. Sit with that for a minute, because it's so powerful. It's so much in tune with what we're doing in the Mosaic as well. And that's why I'm so excited to have you. Through her various roles in businesses, she loves creating opportunities for people to awaken to their incredible potential. Beth believes empowered women empower women. Each of her clients becomes an angel to another, as a portion of all of Beth's endeavors go towards funding programs to empower survivors of abuse and modern slavery. And we're going to talk about modern slavery in a few moments. To become thrivers through education and job training, not just survivors. With her firm belief that service is a critical part of a joy-filled life, in 2013, Beth co-founded Circuitry International, a nonprofit that empowers survivors of human trafficking and abuse through education, job training, and emotional healing. Beth feels that freedom and choice are the foundation of a life well lived. She calls this work a God-Goddess plan, and the mission of her spirit. Along with her many other professional roles, Beth is now executive director of this incredible organization that has already helped hundreds of survivors become thrivers. We're going to talk about that organization. We're going to talk about Beth's life. And I welcome you into this podcast to meet this incredible soul. Beth, how are you today?
I'm really good today. And I'm really, like I said, I'm happy to be here, to be having this conversation. I love your mission too. I love the Mosaic mission. Thank
you so kindly. That's so kind of you to say. I want to start, before we get too involved in your work, to just get a little backstory on you. When you were growing up, what was your favorite thing to do as a kid?
I love to roller skate.
Wow. And did you get good at roller skating?
I did get good at roller skating. I was just an active kid. I loved music. I loved to roller skate, but I actually thought I was going to be a nun. I was very spiritual.
Wow.
So, when you asked me, my fun favorite thing was roller skating, but I was incredibly a devout Catholic. And I thought that, to be spiritual and to lead a spiritual life, the only option for young girls when I was growing up in the 70s was to become a nun. So wow. I actually thought that was going to be was going to be my path.
And did you pursue that? Did you enter a convent?
No way, because I liked roller skating and music and boys too much. So when I found out that as a teenager what was required of being a nun, I thought, oh no. how am I going to lead this spiritual life? You know, and still do all these wonderful things that gave me joy. But when I was 16, I lost my brother to a heart aneurysm, and I lost my faith in a way. So I went on kind of a spiritual quest through
Wow.
my late teens into early 20s.
But you, so from what I'm understanding, you already grew up thinking you were drawn to spirituality. You wanted to be a nun,
Mm-hmm.
but then you lost your
Yeah.
brother. You lost your brother, which is probably like, how does that happen? We have I have a stepdaughter right now, and one of her close friends just committed suicide 2 days ago, and she was just absolutely devastated. And
Yeah.
so for someone, she's 15, you said it's 16. For someone at that young age, I lost my dad when I was 13, my mom when I was 15. So I know the feeling of what it's like to lose people that early on. And how was that challenge of faith for you at that moment? Did you lose? Because you, it seems like you lost your faith, but then somehow the next thing you said is, I wanted to come back and have faith again or something. So explain that to me.
Well, I think what happened is at that time I was questioning my faith. There were so many rules in order to be a quote unquote good Catholic or to follow my faith. And it was in the early 80s, and I felt like my faith had no place for women. You know, there wasn't a strong place for women. And I was growing up, and I was already kind of a strong woman in my, you know, I was raised by strong women. But when my brother passed away, it felt like even within the context of my faith, that wasn't answering my questions of what happens to him? Why would a soul depart at 24 of a heart aneurysm? You know, like I just started having a lot of questions. So when I entered high school, against to my mother's dismay and my family's dismay, I started studying lots of different world religions. And it was through that I returned to my spirituality, but not necessarily the same brand that I was raised within.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant. So I started leading a deeply spiritual life, but it was much more metaphysical.
I understand. And so that you mentioned that was not to the love of your family. How did that go? I mean, here.
Well, you know, my mother, it's an amazing thing. My mother really taught me about, you know, having spirituality in my life. And even though she was upset initially, she had an open enough mind and a deep enough connection to her own spirituality that she was willing to listen, and she was willing to have these courageous conversations around alternative thoughts. So even though it was a little frightening for her and not necessarily what her belief was, we both realized that at the end of the day, we really were talking about the same thing, just using different language and different, you know, she had a different set of rules around what her spirituality, her spiritual life was, versus the quote unquote rules or dogma that I was, you know, inclined to follow, if that makes any sense.
Complete sense. And one of the beautiful things that I love is that we get so used to seeing the world a certain way that when people see the same world slightly differently, we tend to want to disagree with them or fight them often. And if you look at the world we live in, that situation enumerates itself millions of times through the course of a discussion, because we're used to seeing what we see, and we're in that silo, and anything outside of that silo is not what we see, and we're scared of it. So it took tremendous courage at that age to
Exactly.
and so how does that whole experience shape who you are today, or does it?
Oh, it absolutely does. I think how it shapes me is that I realized by studying it very in depth. I mean, I went out to Arizona and studied Native American mysticism for a while, and you know, I studied Asian traditions and Middle Eastern traditions, and you know, initially, and a lot of pagan traditions. I remember my mother saying, "Why are you reading books on witchcraft?" And I
Right.
said, "We're Celtic. Grandma used to sweep she kept a broom by the door, but she was so afraid." But when we when I created those conversations, she was less afraid, as I said. But for me, what I realized is, even though around the world we have these different cultural traditions that tie into our spirituality, we're very much the same.
Yeah.
We most of us want the same things, and it really starts with love and being seen and being respected, and again, freedom and choice. And so that really helped me to evolve, because I started seeing all of these beautiful traditions and recognizing that even though it wasn't the way I was brought up, there was so much beauty in the world, even though through diversity, there was so much beauty.
Yeah. And so you speak a lot of your mother. How did your father play into that? Was he as accepting as your mother, or was he not quite as accepting?
My father my father worked a lot of hours. We're, traditional Irish Catholic family. I grew up with my single aunt, my grandmother, my mother, maiden, mother, and crone in the house. My father loved and adored my mother. So if my mother was happy, he was happy. If my mother was unhappy with us, he was unhappy with us.
Yeah.
My father's spiritual life was very private. So no, he never even questioned what I was doing. He would question if I was making my mother upset or not.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Wow. So sort of the old time,
yeah.
That's like my generation or my parents' generation of growing up, where the dad is the dad. He goes out, he makes the money, he takes care of the family, and then as long as everybody's happy, he's happy, pretty much, to some extent.
Exactly.
But as you were
Exactly.
speaking, I had an intuitive sort of feeling, and so I just want to share this with you and see if it resonates.
Please.
Your ability at an early age to see other possibilities than just the Catholic faith for your spirituality seems to be exactly what you're doing now for the people that you're working with that are in other countries, living impoverished lives or being held slavery to certain companies that they work for, giving them below minimum wage for them, maybe $1 a day or a month or whatever it is. And so is that, do you feel that there's some truth in that somehow you were given the ability to see other possibilities for people, and that's what motivated you, because your own desire to be spiritual and find a new possibility of how to be spiritual satisfied that for you? Is that clear? I feel like I'm mumbling on.
No, because I'm listening also with my heart. She said it's an intuitive hit. So, yeah, it makes sense to me, because one of the things, as I said, early on in my life, I realized that there was no one right path, even though we were all kind of walking to the same destination. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know if this went out. Can you
Yeah,
see me?
now you're back on. It went out
Yeah.
for a minute.
Yeah, I apologize.
No
Yeah,
worries.
we were, but so even though there's no one right path, what I realized is that if I could create opportunities, even with my work and even in what I do now with, for people, for survivors, if I could create opportunities, they would recognize or awaken to their own potential, but that they also could see that there's more out there. So I think that's, some people have this, they're brought up that this is, especially in various third world countries, their mother, their father did this, and that's all they're going to do. And when they suffer a trauma, they're taken away from that way of life anyway. So when we help them to pivot, the whole world opens up for them.
Wow.
And that's it's an exciting thing to see and be a part of, actually.
I can only imagine. I mean, I know it in my life that a change of perspective changes your reality of what your life is you're looking at, right?
Exactly.
And so how did you get from where you were, a kid now sort of seeing there's other ways, exploring various religions and religious practices, and really spiritual practices more than religious practices, to what you're doing today? What would be the connecting piece that made those two realities come together?
Definitely my spirituality, because my mother is very service oriented, and she always told us that, there's a saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. And that's sort of the premise in my family. And my father was a bus driver, and my mother still felt like we were abundant. We had a roof over our heads, we had food. And so we could always give a hand up, not a handout, to somebody. And I love that idea that we should all be standing equally together, that we're not reaching down and feeling sorry for somebody, we're lifting them up to us. So I think that that's definitely the thread that's been throughout my entire life and my many careers that I've had. But I don't know, I think my spirituality has played a part in all of the work I do. If it doesn't resonate with me spiritually, it's not something that I ever stayed with long term. And I got married, I went through a really difficult divorce with little children. So, I had to turn back I was a massage therapist and a healer in my 20s. And, I left an amazing home and a thriving business with my ex-husband, and I had to kind of reinvent myself. And so I circled back to my spiritual practices and to the work that was filling my soul, which was my healing practice. Started building up my client base.
So for people who are stuck in those places where you could have stayed but didn't, what would you say to them to help them lift them up, to put your hand down, and not down, but over even, and just lift them up to this place where they can find the courage to really recreate themselves? Or in the Mosaic, I talk about it as the pieces that surround us are just the pieces that surround us. And the beauty of a mosaic is that if you're unhappy with the pieces that surround you, you can move the piece out. Unlike a jigsaw puzzle where every piece has to go exactly where it goes, and that's the beauty of it. Every piece has its place, but in a mosaic, no piece has its place. You can create a mosaic anyhow and any way you want, and if the piece is glued in there, you can even shatter the mosaic and still recreate it because it's made up of broken pieces, right? So what would you say to people who feel like they're a piece that's stuck in the place where they are, and they're too scared to take that journey out of that place because you went through a tough divorce, you recreated yourself, you left a religion that was your family religion. Like, you've already, in just a few minutes, you've made some monumental steps, and we haven't even gotten to some of the things that you're doing, which are huge steps, right? So what would be the one piece of advice that you would say to somebody at that point?
Well, I can just tell you what I've told my many, many clients in my divorce work is, you're always a choice and your thoughts become your reality. And so if you are going to continue to stay in the past chapter, your life is a tapestry of the things that happen to you, but you are not what happened to you. You are eternal, you are divine. So if you're going to focus on an incident or a situation, you're focusing on something, first of all, that's outside of you and is already in the past. So, I've told my divorce clients, if you want to keep telling the story, you're staying in the last chapter of your life. And it's time to start writing the new chapter. And that's through changing your mind, choosing new thoughts, and honoring that that's a part of your tapestry, a part of your mosaic, a part of the story of your life, but it's not who you are. It's just a piece of who you are.
I love that, because so often we think that who we are in this moment is who we are, but who we are in this moment is only who we are in this moment, right? It isn't who we are, right? And I love that in my book. There's a chapter called The Road Worker, and he says no matter how beautiful the road is, every road will eventually develop a pothole. And the beautiful thing about watching people with a pothole is some drive right around it, some drive in it and ruin the front end of their car and get it fixed. Some drive into it, ruin the front end of their car, and hope nobody will notice and drive around saying nothing's wrong, but everybody sees it. But they don't want to disrupt the myth that the person's living in. But he says the most interesting one is the people that drive into that pothole and stay there and forget that just 2 inches on the other side of that pothole is a whole new world. And they forget about the glorious road that
Right.
brought them. And that pothole is where we get stuck
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So
Yeah.
changing your thoughts, changing your reality, and to people who just say, I don't know how to do that. Like every time I try and do that, I just get stuck and pulled back to the thoughts that I have. Is there a technique or something you do with your divorce clients that you also do with the people that you work with in different countries that are not going through divorce, but are just going through adversity in their lives? What's the method?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Would
there's
you,
lots of, I think there's not just one method. There's lots of different exercises, and it's sort of like when you're, if you're in the same situation and you keep, like you said, if you stay in the pothole or you keep going, you keep going through the pothole again and again, you're going to get the same result. So it's also determining, people don't change unless the outcome that they're looking for is not the outcome that they want. Sometimes, being the wounded person is getting them the love or the attention that they think that they want, even though it's not what they want. So, making that change can be difficult because they're getting the attention, or they're getting some sort of emotional energy from whatever that is, that woundedness. But if they're afraid to change, I always say, you start with your exterior environment. I love music and art. Creating a new fun playlist for yourself, choosing to read different material, watching what you talk about. If you continue to turn back and talk about your lack of money, how it always, I tell people, look at always, never. I always try this and it always happens this way. Well, how about not always trying that? Because if it doesn't work, so pivoting. So really noticing your patterns, and noticing your patterns, not only of thought, but the words that are coming out of your mouth, what you do. I mean, we're habitual creatures. So breaking the patterns, I think, even in your daily routines, helps to create a different outcome, especially if you're looking to make a big change, whether that's getting over a partner, creating more money in your life, building a business, whatever it is, creating a deeper spiritual practice, what have you.
Totally. So one of the things that I've noticed in the work that I do and in the world that I live in is that most people don't go that deep. Most people don't take the time to actually get to know themselves. We get caught in the momentum of the life that we're living, and we continue to go to the same place for lunch and order the same thing we had yesterday. And we come home at the same time, and we work and we watch the same television shows, and we have the same conversations, and we do the same things, and we try, and we get caught in, as Alan Watts would say, we get caught in this cycle of making more money to continue to do the things that we don't like to do to impress the people we don't even care about. And so
True.
how like in your situation, because I want to sort of segue a little bit now into the work that you're doing through Durga International. Is that Circuitry International? Let's talk a little bit about Circuitry International and what that is, and then let's segue this conversation. Let's remember where we were, of how to change the reality of people that are stuck in the reality that they're stuck in, right? And so I think it'll be beneficial for people to see, because those people are really, like, some of the people you work with, there's no possibility in their minds that they'll ever get out of there until somebody like you comes along and says, hold it, there is another possibility. Talk to us a little bit about Circuitry International.
Okay, so Circuitry International was founded in 2013 by myself, my husband, and my niece, who's an educator in New Jersey. And the reason why, it was really it wasn't by accident, but it was by our ability and our willingness to pivot that Durga was created. I owned a wellness center. I thought I was doing my service by empowering women to heal and create a life well lived, however that looked for them. I was buying only fair trade and survivor-made products, but we received a call to action from an anti-trafficking organization in India. And what I was told at the time was that there was a village where actually almost, well, every little girl under the age of 10 was now missing or gone missing or down in some of the cities in southern India because of the trafficking epidemic in the T region in northern India.
Hold on 1 minute. I just want to, it gets so easy to get that caught in a soundbite. You heard of a village where almost every girl under 10 years old was vanished and now is someplace else. I mean, was that was that like 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people? I mean, what were the sizes of those numbers?
It was probably under 50 young girls when you consider the size of the village, but it was multiple villages where this was beginning to happen. And, you know, for me, and I mean, this is an interesting part of the conversation when we first talked last week, when I heard it, I am a mother of 5. I have 2 children. I have 3 stepchildren. I consider them all of my children. And so, but as a mother, when I heard it, I was angry. I was shocked. I was upset. But, you know, I've always felt like we're given all of our emotions for a reason, and it's what we do with them. And so I said to Sarah, who is the woman who's the director of this particular organization who reached out to us, I said, how is this possible? And she educated me on when, you know, the demand for boutique teas has taken away the jobs in like the big tea companies like Lipton and what have you. They were closing down, and the little fingers of the girls that used to pick the tea buds, they no longer needed employment. And traffickers were coming in and posing as people that were going to give girls jobs as seamstresses or in companies. And now these are families where they're poor, they're vulnerable, they're uneducated, they're not tapped into technology, and they think, my children are starving, but if I send my daughter down here, she's going to be able to make a living, send money back to the village, be safe, maybe get married. And so they were handing their children over to traffickers, and traffickers are sophisticated, and they know that. And so when Sarah taught me that, you know, educated me on that, there was just, I couldn't not act. And that's usually what I'll sit, I'll meditate through my spirituality, but then I go, all right, if this upsets me, if this causes an emotion in me, what can I do to throw some love at it? That's why our motto is love in action.
Love it.
So we started to talk about, well, what could we do? She was building a shelter. She needed $50,000 by a certain time. She had already raised a certain amount of money, but if she didn't raise this much, she was going to lose the property. And, you know, I sat down with my husband and Jess, and I said, there's more organizations like hers around the world that are not getting the big grants. They're not being seen, but they are literally helping the survivor. They're on the ground, they're looking at the need, they're addressing the need. And it's an organic approach that felt right for us. So we decided to create this organization, but also create this organization where we were creating a conversation around the world, that it's not happening in one country. It's not one person's problem. Because Durga has 8 arms. And Durga is the goddess that was created by 8 gods, because not one god could eradicate evil. They all had to figure out how to work together. So they created this goddess, and they gave her their tool or their gift. So each of the arms is a representation of the god's gift to her. But she's the Holy Mother. You know, she's one of the oldest deities in India. And the whole concept for us was many organizations working around the world to eradicate, you know, this growing epidemic, which is slavery. So we told Sarah, we're going to figure it out. We're going to raise the money, and we didn't know how. And it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of wine and cheese nights. It was $5 at a time. And that was in June. And by the following January, we had fully funded the $50,000, and we were off and running as an organization.
And so, first of all, fabulous, and congratulations, and what a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And so what happened then to those girls? Now they're in the shelter. What? Because like some of the stories of India, and I love India. It's one of my favorite countries, and yet the casts and the stories and the treatment of women. Sometimes, you know, when a family has a child and it's born a woman, some in the olden times, now it's changing a little bit, but still in the
A
places that
little.
we don't get to see, they want to give the child up for adoption or kill there was stories where girls were killed because the parents are so poor they don't want to have to take care of the daughter, and they
Mhm.
don't want, right? And so how now are they doing? Do you follow up with these with this organization that took these?
Oh,
Tell us about that.
yeah, no, so there's, I think there's, I want to say there's 40, maybe 43 girls in the shelter now, not
Wow.
shelter. Many of the girls that we originally helped have already been reintegrated or moved on. And, you know, most of them, most of them are doing fine. Some of them are not. You know, when the reality of trafficking is if you've been trafficked 20 to 30 times, whether it's sexual or if you've been abused, there are, some of the girls don't make it. There is suicide, there's depression, there's AIDS, there's various diseases that they have. So not every soul makes it. And so our philosophy too is every soul matters at one human life at a time, and it's quality over quantity. But what we do, one of our commitments is doing due diligence. So we know where all of the money is spent. And what we have found over the course of 5 years is that it's not enough to rescue and shelter a survivor. And so over the 5 years, our premise or our work has shifted but through conversation with partners. It's like I said, it's crazy. And I think this is where my spirituality, comes in. Is I'm sitting in Guatemala, I'm in India, I'm in Thailand, and I'm saying, what do they need? And you hear the same thing. They need a job, they need to be educated, and they need to be economically empowered so they're not vulnerable to be trafficked, especially a mother. Because if a mother it's going to come between her child, she's going to traffic herself again to protect her child. And so many slaves recycle into the slavery market, even here in the United States, because they don't have other opportunities. So we shifted our focus from just, helping our nonprofits, our other partners around the world to build a shelter, what have you, to specifically education and economic empowerment. So for instance, in Jalpaiguri, the girls that we sponsor are being sponsored because they're going to school, and we're providing long-term sustainable solutions. So, it's not an easy go, because a lot of in the nonprofit world, people want to see you saving 100,000 girls. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
well, you can rescue 100,000 girls, but then what happens to them after?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we like big results, but what's really important is real results, because we can't quantify what
Yeah,
happens to 100,000 people. We can quantify what happens to the ones and twos or 100 or 40 or whatever it is, because we can watch them over the course of time. One of the things that I think touched my heart the most about
right.
what you're doing, and this is not a time for me to talk about it, but we spoke about it a little, is my dollar a month club, where we take the $1 a month from every individual, and my goal is to grow that to 1 billion people, and then that all of us contribute $1 a month, and for the people that can't, we find sponsors that do $2 a month to bring people in, and we invite them in dialogue
Right.
to sort of see how do they think we need to solve their problems. And it's such a beautiful idea where we'll meet together, we'll dialogue, we'll use swarm intelligence to come up with possible solutions. And then when we get to the place where we have $1 billion a month, and I think what you were very helpful to me in our first conversation is, well, you don't have to wait to 1 billion. Like get to 1 million, and then there's a tons of places that $1 million a month we could really help 5, 10, 15, 20 organizations to have something that they've never had. And so as we move, we'll continue to contribute to those places. But the thought, really, what I loved about what you're doing is the fact that not only does every person matter, but every person has the ability within themselves to help somebody and to help themselves. Because when we think of the
Absolutely.
world, when we think of the world as being connected, like, do you believe what we're all connected? Do you believe the world is connected, or do you not believe that?
Well, I do. I think I do, but I
Right.
do a lot of talking. I do a lot of talking about that because I tell people, we have a lot of anxiety, depression. We have a lot of emotional and mental health issues here in the United States. And I feel that a lot of people aren't considering, the fact that they might be wearing clothing that, a farmer was exploited and the person who made it was exploited. And then they're putting rose quartz crystals in their room, and they're not considering who mined that crystal, and if it was mined by a slave, and how was the earth and the environment treated in order to get that stone. So there's an energy and an interconnectedness. And so if we're exploiting others, like the earth and animals, to receive a good or a service here, we're going to be affected by that. So I believe in a positive way we're interconnected, but I also think in a way that can be potentially the abstract of that, we're interconnected. And that's why we have a responsibility to each other and to the earth and to our animal and to the animal life here.
So
100%.
I adore you, because like, you took it also to a whole nother place, which is that if you think we're changing in time now from a world of form, which believes that everything is solid and this body is solid, to quantum physics is now showing us that our body is made up not of nothing solid. It's just made up of energy, and things are moving, and it's swirls of energy moving at protons and neurons and whatever. I'm not smart enough to know the scientific terms, but all that stuff moving in at speeds that there's nothing solid within us, to a world where we are knowing and starting to realize that our world is a world of energy. And so if that reality is true, which science is showing us is true, I'm going to have someone on the podcast in a few weeks who is a scientist who literally shows people that what you see is not at all real. It's just your perception. What you see is a perception, and your perception is what you think it is rather than what's real. But anyway, then what's also possible is the energy of how things are created affect the energy of what is created. And I love that you were talking I love that you're talking about that beautiful rose quartz crystal that we have in our room that we think has so much beauty, but when the earth is destroyed with no intention of its wellness to create it, or when people are enslaved and doing that against their will, but to make a dollar because that's the best option they think they have, that energy goes in, and we are so much more empathetic than we realize. All of that affects us, and we don't have any idea, right? So
yeah, that's why I think some people go, I don't know why I'm sad. And I'm like, well, I think we need to look around, and how often do we write on a piece of paper and think, wow, this was a tree.
Yeah.
This was life force. And how blessed am I to have this tree? And when I was studying Native American spirituality, they talked a lot about that, this mindfulness of, it's not even about not using the tree or not using the plant or employing the person. It's about the mindfulness. And I think we've lost that because we're very busy and we've become disconnected, but we are all interconnected. That is my premise. That's my firm belief.
So let me jump out of who I am and go into the voice of what I think what a listener might be saying now. I mean, this situation gets so overwhelming that it affects the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the products we buy. How do you reverse that trend? Because in a world where people are wanting to make a dollar and everybody's trying to get rich over somebody, or make a living, even not even get rich, they're just trying to make a living, to those girls that are sold to slavery with the thought that maybe I can give some money back to my family. They're not trying to get rich. They're just trying to say, how do I take care of myself? And the parents are saying, how can we rid ourselves of this burden or whatever and get them to be okay? How does that change? Like How does it's so vast, it's so overwhelming. How does it change?
Well, I think first of all, we have to start having courageous conversations, and we have to honor our interconnectedness. I think it starts with honoring our interconnectedness. I love coffee. I'll just give you a perfect example. I love coffee. I love Guatemalan coffee. It's some of my favorite coffee. And, I'm pouring beans into my coffee machine and I'm thinking, who picked this coffee? How blessed am I that that person is in another country, in a warm climate when it's 10 below zero in January here, and I still have access to coffee. So if that's a beautiful thing that I enjoy, then it's about creating dialogue around countries where I'm receiving a goods and service. So instead of being overwhelmed, I think first of all, it starts with an intention of gratitude. Even if you don't do anything, be aware of what you have, what's around you, and how blessed you are. And you have IT. We have technology. So much IT comes from India. We call call centers, and you're calling India. And how beautiful is that? They're helping us with a solution for our cell phone. But it's this being awake to our interconnectedness, and not being afraid or feeling guilt or shame, but first awakening to that. Secondly, it is about asking questions. A lot of people say, wow, I don't buy girls. I wouldn't be involved in the sex trafficking industry. I can't change the cultural mindset of somebody in India or in Thailand. And I agree with them there. But I always say to them, but you can talk to the companies where you purchase your products. We have more power than we know because we're the consumer. And if we pull our dollars, we don't need to consume the amount that we consume. We can hold off on the extra pair of leggings or the coffee, or whatever we want that instant, to make a demand to understand and know where something comes from, and say to a company, I cannot buy something from you if you're not going to treat the people who manufacture your stuff with integrity, or you're not going to respect the earth. I mean, palm oil, most people don't even think palm oil is in Cheez-Its and in organic products, but we're not thinking where it's harvested. There's so much slavery. It's killing the rainforest, and it's killing orangutans and tigers. We don't know that. So I say, become awake, just educate yourself, and do small things. Like on our website, we have a conscious consumer guide. Check it out. Make small changes. I don't know, I'm sure you remember in the 70s when I was growing up, there was no recycling. Nobody recycled. New York City looked terrible. I mean, it was just going downhill. But then people started saying, hey, why don't we recycle? Why don't we have these things in airports? And now recycling is a way of life. We don't all do it perfectly, but we're doing more. And so it's shifting the paradigm. It's not here. It's not like where it needs to be, but it's not where it was. So it's shifting it slowly. And that's the thing with human slavery. When, if we want to reduce slavery, we have to reduce the demand. And even though, like you said, people are trying to make a living, it's not me and you and the person who's trying to make a minimum wage living that is going to suffer if we pull our dollars. It's the big companies. And so like, it's, we're not going to suffer. It's the profit. It's the shareholders. And so I just think, wherever human beings are being consumed, quote unquote, animal right violations are happening, and so are ecological disasters. So if we care about the earth and animals, we have to care about people too. So it's about doing little things. It's about making small changes, not becoming overwhelmed by the topic. I'm sorry, are you there?
I'm there. You just disappeared for a minute. So I like the little mystique that you have of just disappearing every once in a while. No, I'm teasing.
My witchiness.
Yeah, I love everything that you are saying. And I just want to sort of sit with this idea with people and just invite them to sort of consider, how do we make that change? because it's so prevalent in everything. It's prevalent in the food we eat. It's prevalent in the clothes we wear. It's prevalent in the cars we drive. It's prevalent in the computers that we speak to and the phones that we carry. It's prevalent in every single thing. And you say a word, and I notice every time you say it, there's something in me that just pops up. Like I just can't stand the word, and it's slavery, because we sort of think that we've grown past that place where we're slaves, right? But it's such an ugly word, and it's happening so much right in front of our eyes. Forget about the fact that we're slaves to our own desires, or we're slaves to doing things the way we think they should be done. But there are people that are working in slavery. And we're about to colonize the moon. And these are problems that should be gone. These are things that we thought we solved a long time ago, but we haven't solved them at all. And so, does Circuitry International have sort of a system or a way, or is it? I know you're helping the people that are enslaved, but how about just me and you and all the people that want to say, hold it, I'm incensed by this. And I want to put my love into action. I want to change this. I want to become a part of something that will help this eradicate. Does Circuitry have a way for them to contribute or volunteer or become a member, or like tell us the way someone can get involved? Because if there is, like, I listened to it and I sit in awe. Like at first I think, well, it's so big, how will we ever conquer it? But it's so pervasive, how will we ever do anything? But the beauty to me is that one person has the power to change the entire world. Do you take a look at somebody like a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King? They didn't even have the internet in those times, but they just stood for what was true. And people believed in what was true. And so there comes a certain point in time where what is true is more important than what I need or what I think I need. Like, we have to start to get back to what's true.
Right.
How does Circuitry International help bring people back to that reality? Or does it? I mean, is there something else that does it?
Well, I do. No, I think we do. I think, we're doing it on a small scale. We intentionally decided to grow organically. We feel it's very important that our community of donors and volunteers and investors is taken care of, as well as our donor, as well as the survivors that we're helping to become thrivers, because we're interconnected, right? So I think there's many different ways. First of all, as I began to tell you, I think it starts with courageous conversations and ultimately respect. We have to respect the cultures in which these things are happening. So, for instance, in India or in Guatemala, what they need in education and job skills is, we can't go down there with an agenda. We have to ask them. We have to trust that they know what they need, because they're divine beings too. Just because somebody needs a hand up does not make them less than us. They just need a hand up. Everybody needs a hand up at different times in their life. So having those conversations. Durga, our big platform here in the United States, because people will tell me all the time, well, it's happening here in the United States. Yes. And it is. Girls are being trafficked in the United States. So are little boys. Their labor is being exploited here. But there are organizations that are addressing those issues and receiving grants that's not what we're doing. What our big mission here in the United States is twofold. We have a travel safety toolkit that we're digitizing for young people who are traveling abroad, because our young people are international beings. They travel. My children travel more than I've ever, than I traveled until I was 30 or 40.
Right.
So we're excited about empowering them. We also have our conscious.
And hold on one minute. So are those travel kits? Is the thing that you're not saying in that is that children who travel independently to foreign places run the risk of being taken into some of this slavery, or what are the safety guides for?
Absolutely. They're absolutely at risk of being trafficked, exploited, raped, abused. They're vulnerable. And so my belief is that you don't act in fear, but if you're informed and you're educated, then you're not reacting, you're proactive. So,
Yeah.
you know, how do we empower our young people to become international citizens? They have to recognize that cultures are different where they travel, that situations are different, and that, you know, we want to give them all the tools that we can so that they are as safe as possible. So we actually have a great intern. We have the toolkit, but we're digitizing it, and it's free. This is something we offer because we are a nonprofit. It's free to any student that wants it. And the other thing that I'm passionate about doing is I will come and I'll speak to schools, I'll speak to groups, I'll speak to communities. I do PowerPoints on conscious consumerism and how we play a role, but small steps we can take every day to reduce the demand through our simple actions. And there's so many small, simple steps. We have monthly contributions, $5 for freedom, $5 a month for freedom, which helps us support our program. So there's simple ways. I mean, of course, if somebody wants to send me a $5 million check, I can't tell you what I could do with it because I don't have a lot of overhead, but I'm being silly now. It is
But let's
that,
not be
but
silly
it's
now.
also,
Let's not be silly now. Why
no,
why not have the
yeah,
possibility and
no,
put
I'm
it
not,
out there that
of
somebody
course,
listening will be moved by
of
this so
course.
much that they'll send a $5 million check to you? I mean,
Oh, of
let's
course. No, that's not the point. I mean, we could do 10 million too, but what I'm saying is many hands, and I love to say many hands make light. When you think of light workers, make light work. And so every single person can do something to empower other people to be free and to have choice. Because when we're free and we're at choice, there's a different sense of peace we have. And you touched on something that's critical to the work that I do here in the United States when you said many of us are enslaved in different ways in our own personal lives. And that's why on my bio, I say empowered women or empowered people empower people. Because when we're still struggling, when we still feel emotionally enslaved to something or attached to something or caught in fear or anger or pain, we're not able to get out of our own story and into the world around us and empowering other people. So it is part of my work to uplift and empower people, because when they are free, when they feel like they're free of their pain or free of their story, then they do have the power to go out and change lives. I always, that's why I am very passionate about people getting past their pain story or getting over that so that they can go out and make this world an even better place for themselves
and
and
even
others.
I love the way you do it because it's just lifting up people. It's not teaching,
Mm-hmm.
it's not lecturing. It's just basically one of the things that I want to see happen is the whole paradigm of our world change from a vertical reality where these are the fixers and these are the people that know and these are the people that need fixed, and the fixers make a lot of money on the people that they're fixing because they hope that they're going to fix them, and it never really works, or it works a few times, and and people go to another fixer to
Thank you.
fix them, right, to fix them again, to a mosaic reality where everybody is on the same table, everybody's at the same level. And sometimes you just need to lift the piece up of where it is and move it to another piece, move it to another place to have a different chance of how to do it. And that whole idea of just lifting people up is the upliftment that the world needs. I love that terminology that you have, that the upliftment of our world is if when we all decide to just lift one more person up, no matter where we are, we can always lift somebody up. We can be at the bottom of the barrel, but we can lift somebody else up because there's somebody down there with us that needs it just
And
in
think of the
that moment.
potential. And think of the potential we're missing when we decide to judge somebody by what they've gone through, or even ourselves when we decide that we are what happened to us. One of the things that I'm the most amazed at is when I have been with survivors, as young as 4. Think of a little one as young as 4 years old who's been trafficked and can run around with bubbles and loves being on a swing set and is just thrilled to be a little girl again and knowing what happened to her. And, to hear these amazing social workers and people who day in and day out are dealing with such trauma and pain, but they're these beautiful souls who are not feeling like, they're not acting as though they're the healer. They're reminding these survivors that they're not what happened to them,
Love it.
that they are these infinite divine beings. They suffered something terrible, incredibly, there's no words for that, but that is not who they are. That happened to them, but who they are is timeless. It's perfect. It's love. And it's amazing to see them do art, and they look at the art, or they create jewelry, and they realize, wow, I'm an artist. I have so much beauty in me, and I can create this beauty. And so that's why when I do my work here with people, I tell them, if a survivor can overcome that, you can overcome your limitations. It's
Love
about
it.
tapping into your divinity. And I can't do that for you. Nobody else can do that for you, because you already have it inside of you. It's perfect. You're perfect. That's my
So
biggest frustration, is when people are like, I'm this and I'm that. I'm like, no, you're awesome.
that's
You're
right.
amazing.
So I think you already answered, like, we're at the place where we're going to have to wind down, because we, like, this, we could talk for
Yeah.
forever, and I love it. But the two questions I always end with, the first one is, if there was one thing from everything you've learned, from all that you've seen, from all the experiences you've had, that you could share with the world right now, and you could say it without anger, and it would be heard without judgment, what would be that one thing that you would want to share with everybody?
We really are one human family. We are, and I really want people to listen to that. We are one human family, no matter what color you are, no matter, and color really, that's, no matter what race you are, no matter what religion you are, no matter what your economic status is, your gender preference, your sexual preference. We are one human family, and we all want to be loved. We all want to be seen and respected and honored and lifted up. And if we could love each other well, I mean, just love and accept each other, not always agree with one another, but love and accept each other, it would really change the world. It would change the world. If we stopped pointing fingers at one another and we started having conversations, we could change this world and listen to each other.
I think you've read every page on my website, or just talked to me more than we have. We have, right? I couldn't agree more. So I know the world has come a long way from the world that where people were tarred and feathered, or people were beaten. But in some ways, the world hasn't come that far. And so when you dream of the world that you wanted to hand over to your children and to your children's children, is this the world that you wanted to give them?
No, and that's why I'm an abolitionist. I'm not afraid for my children. I don't operate from fear or anger. I feel those feelings. I operate from love, and I want the world to be a better place for my children. I want it to be safer. I want there to be more tolerance and respect and love. As I said, not always, I'm not pouring pink paint over the world.
Right.
There's gonna be strife and pain, but I want it to be safer, cleaner, more love-filled. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't believe in talking the talk. I feel like you have to walk your talk.
Love it.
And there's a great saying, if you call and no one answers, go anyway.
I
And
love it.
so that's one of my beliefs too. Sometimes I walk this walk with many people, and sometimes I walk it alone, but this is my mission, to make people more aware of their interconnectedness and empower more people so they can go out and love and empower others.
So, I mean, we are so in sync. I love it. And you would think that we've been talking for hundreds of years together. This is our second conversation. So I
We
want
might have been.
but I want to just highlight how much when we have the time to have conversation, how much harmony and synchronicity we find, and how much connectedness we find. If you were to give one simple thing like the world's complex. Solving the problems of the world can be hard to imagine. But if you could give one simple practice that people could do today, what would be that one practice?
Listen with love.
Either you're a mind reader, or you know me, or we're just more connected than I can ever imagine. But that would be exactly, I think when the world starts to listen rather than talk, when we stop trying to be inspiring and start to inspire, everything in the world changes, and we are so much more connected. I want to just thank you, Beth, so much for being on the show. If people
Thank
now,
you.
if they don't want to get in contact with you, I don't know what's wrong with them, but if they do want to get in contact with you, if they want to contribute or be a part of the work you're doing, or learn more from you, or have you come and speak, how can they get in contact with you? And we'll post some of this below when we do in our show notes. But can you give them, how would they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
We have many ways. I have a website. It's bethtiger.com. But Durga has a website. It's Durga, D-U-R-G-A, DurgaTreeInternational.org, since it's a nonprofit.
Okay.
Durga Tree is on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So just there's so many ways to reach out to us. And we'd love to have people be a part of our community.
Okay. And again, we will post all of that underneath it.
Great.
Thank you so much. I just want to take a moment and summarize,
Thank you.
if I can, while you're here. There's no one that would look into the world today and say it's an easy world that we're living in, that it's a world without problems, that it's a world that is easy to change. But unless we all somehow put a hand out to lift somebody else up, like Beth is saying, and give people the opportunity to see a different perspective, to see the world slightly different, to take a situation that seems like it has no solution and to offer a solution, or to offer a different perspective, or to come together to brainstorm how to find those solutions. That really is what the Mosaic is all about. That's really what Beth is all about. And I know offline, Beth, I want to have lots more conversations with you, because I believe the work of the $1 a month club that we're starting and the work that you're doing have to coexist together. And we have to bring you into that, and we have to grow together to create. Here's what I see. So many organizations on their own are doing amazing things. It's time to mosaic all of those organizations. I don't care if it's called the Mosaic, it doesn't matter. The image is just easy to see, but we have to mosaic the pieces of all of that together so that we help each other and support each other in making the change, because one person can do a lot, but connected, we can do everything.
Right.
So it is with that in mind that I say thank you for tuning into this podcast. Beth, thank you for sharing your time with us and your expertise. And I hope this is the beginning, not the end, of an amazing relationship.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It was really great to have this conversation. Truly, really, it was a blessing.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for the work you're doing. Okay. Until next time, we'll see you later.